Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on my virtual book club. Listen, right before we get started, you know what we do. Let's make sure that you share this session now. You don't want to miss. We have another exciting author for you. So make sure you start watch party. Make sure all of your friends and everyone you're connected to. Listen, we're in the middle of a pandemic. You might as well read a good book, right? So make sure you share this now. And by all means, if something is said that penetrates your heart or that's just good to you, make sure you comment today. Today we are going international. That's right. The virtual book club is now officially international. We have sharing with us today, first-time author of a new book in the middle of a pandemic. Sharlette Reid is joining us today. Sharlette, how are you?
I'm doing really well. Thank you for having me on, Rashad. Looking forward to it.
Thank you for joining us today. Now, for those who are at home and don't know who you are, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So my name's Cheyenne Reed and I'm based here in London in London. And I am an author. Previously, I couldn't say that about myself. I was and still am a director and tutor of children. So teaching children from primary school all the way through to secondary school. So that's your elementary school through to high school and middle school as well. So here, the last few years, I have been the director of a tuition centre. So we've had quite a few different members of staff who teach children in English and maths. And beyond that, we have several centres across London, and we have some partner schools that we work with. And it all was birthed out of the fact that there were many children who were very bright, very gifted, very talented, and academic, but whose parents didn't have the money to send them to tutoring to get the necessary knowledge they need for some of the best schools we have here in London in grammar and private schools. So we kind of cut the price and made it more affordable for them, and that's how the tuition kind of began. And since then, it's just really grown. Of course, now with the pandemic, we're doing everything online, having to adjust and adapt as best as we can. And beyond that, in terms of like just ministry and church work, so I was one of the part of the pastoral team in a previous church I was at for 20 years till I moved at the beginning of this year. And the essence of some of the work I did was oversee kind of the media team, began the young adult ministry, which is doing super well without me. Some amazing leaders who have taken it over. And just, supporting with the leadership of the team. So that's a little bit of what I've done, a lot of missions in between, a lot of traveling to different countries, which has been a blessing. So that's kind of a pulse of my work.
Great. And in the middle of all that you're doing and all that you have done, you decided, hey, I'm going to be an author now. Tell us about your journey to becoming the author of the Emerge book.
Well, I tell you what, Rashad, if someone told me I would be an author in 2020, a couple of years ago, I would probably laugh, whilst walking in the other direction.
Right.
I know that since my childhood, my mum used to say, Charlotte, you love to write. You write a lot. You write reams and reams and reams. And as it is with most of our talents, when you've got a talent, sometimes you just don't always develop it. You don't cultivate what comes naturally to you.
Mm-hmm.
And lots of facts have proven that, you know. So we have lots of talents, which in the book I call your flint,
Mm-hmm.
your natural raw material.
Mm-hmm.
That often goes completely overlooked, and we focus more on gaining skills and academics and our spiritual giftings more, and leave some of the other things that come natural behind. And I did that with my writing. In 2016, my brother got married in Antigua, and the book kind of touches a little bit on this. And I was frustrated, Rashad. I was like, oh my gosh, you know, I need some help, Lord. Yeah, I'm serving and I'm giving and I'm doing. But I had some challenges within my business, a couple of challenges financially, and I was just looking for some sort of solution, some idea of what to do next.
Mm-hmm.
And that first night in Antigua, I prayed and asked God for some direction, and I had a dream that I wrote a book. Well, as like with most people, I was pretty unimpressed when I woke up. I was like, you know, God, I'm asking you for solutions. I'm not sure writing a book is going to be one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was really reluctant. I didn't move on it. I just wrote it down back in 2016, and I didn't start writing till the beginning of 2019. So yeah, I had come out of a relationship that I thought was really going to work. You know, we'd had some conversations about living and marrying first and then living. And we'd spoken a lot about, you know, kind of future. And I was already like in the mode, and we were praying and stuff. And God just kind of showed me, no, Charlotte, this isn't for you. And it was really crushing. It was really crushing. And like most of us, you invest emotionally in something before you invest mentally and spiritually and psychologically. Emotionally, you've already put yourself out there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember going through some notepads and just going back to some things that God has said. And, you know, sometimes when you get to a point when you think, you know, where am I going? And I like to kind of go back, and I did. And when I went back, I found the note from 2016 that mentioned that I was going to write a book. And I thought, Sean, that's the thing that you prayed about, God answers, and you've not done anything with it. And so I began writing January 2019.
All right. And you completed the book in the middle of a pandemic. Talk about how frustrating or how challenging it was, not just to write the book, but to finish it, you know, in the middle of all this going on right now.
Oh my goodness. Incredibly hard, if I could just put it in a short sentence.
Yeah.
I think as a writer, a new writer, you learn so much about yourself. I think every writer has a voice, every writer has a style. Your voice comes through in your writing, and the more mature you are as a writer, the more you get more sensitive to that. Your writing style starts to flourish in a different way. But I think for me, I was learning about my own writing voice. I can be quite serious sometimes. I can be quite comical. Getting the balance is important in my writing.
Right.
But I think with all the change that was going on around me, finding those still moments. I'm a writer who writes at night. Some people are afternooners. Some people are morning time people. I'm a nighttime person. And I like nighttime because it's quiet. The world seems dark and very still. So I think for me, sometimes I was up till early hours of the morning with Sean, just because it was quiet. My mind could rest. There was no news about lockdown and what tier we're in, and you know, all the changes going on. And sometimes it was just really stressful to just, how am I going to get quiet with so much frantic change? And when that's in your atmosphere, it impacts on how you write. You know, so it was really hard. I had to take a week in between some time, booked into a hotel, and just had like a solid week of no interruptions to home in on writing the book, you know. So it was very testing emotionally, there were some times I was like, ah, you know, I felt like the woman who was on Bridesmaids, incredibly stressed in a bathroom moment. But I didn't have a bathroom moment, but I did have a moment. I had a moment when I was like holding onto the side of my kitchen, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. And they're real moments you had. I had what they call writer's block at some point, where there's moments you write and it flourishes and it comes to you naturally, organically, almost like a running stream. And those moments when you feel like you have to fight and contend just to get a simple concept down. So I had all of that, Rashad. I really did. But yeah, we made it through in the midst of the pandemic.
Well, good. And since you've made it, we now have the Emerge book. Let's open up the book and deal with chapter 1, which you have titled "The Knocking." Let's talk about that.
The knocking is derived from that famous chapter that's in Revelations 3:20, when it talks about God standing at the door and knocking. And you know, if we hear him, then we're to open up the door and to let him in, and he will sup with us, communicate with us, share fellowship with us. But it's this sense that God is outside trying to get inside. There's a sense that he's trying to get our attention, and he needs a response. And I think I reached a point where I went to bed one night. The book talks about it, and sometimes you can just be so busy with activity, Rashad. You know, if it's not the home, it's the children. If it's not the children, it's church. If it's not church, it's finances. It's everything. You know, it's the husband, it's the wife, it's the cat, it's the dog. But I think that I got to a point where that kind of rhythm, which was an irregular rhythm of just busyness and activity, was becoming all-consuming. And yes, I was serving. And yes, I was still preaching, I was still teaching my kids, I was doing a lot of things. But deep within on the inside, there was this real sense of unrest, this inner frustration that the rhythm I had to life was almost impossible to continue to sustain. And one night I went to bed, and I don't know if I was at boiling point. You know, some people get like that. But I just fell down in the middle of, I don't know what time of the morning. And I just cried out to God, and I was like, I cannot continue to live my life like this. I really believe that there's so much more than what I'm experiencing. Like, you know, I can't continue in this irregular rhythm. I was stressed, I was frustrated, I was tired, but I was still going. And I was going because I got used to going, even when I was tired, even when I was stressed, even when I was fatigued. And that morning I just cried out. I was like, you know what, God, I just need so much more from you. Like, I give you my all, as if I hadn't done it already, but I felt like it was like ultimate. I'm at the end of my wit's end. And sometimes we're afraid of moments like that. We sometimes think there's something wrong with saying that where I am is insufficient. You know, I need more of you. But God just really taught me about just so much humility in the process. And he began me on what I call was a journey to emerging. And the knocking chapter just takes people through the sense that, you know, the World Health Organization says, and this is in chapter 1, that we have the busiest world than we've had in ever. The world has never been so noisy. That noise is actually preventing people from recognizing things, perceiving things, acknowledging things. You know, it's no wonder why God says, you know, sometimes I'm doing a new thing. Can you not perceive it? Because I think with all the busyness, and some of us even listening tonight might even say that, there's so much going on that just finding a quiet moment to hear and be still is something we have to kind of fight for nowadays. You know? So the knocking begins right there, teaching us again, exposing some things, and asking us to come back to a place of listening and come back into that harmony, that flow of the Holy Spirit of God as he leads us through life, and to awaken again to this sense that there is far much more than what some of us are settling for. in life.
Yeah, I think when you talk about the noise and the busyness, I think one thing the pandemic did was it forced all the noise, all the busyness to come to a halt so that we could ultimately, hear the knocking. And unfortunately, he wouldn't have to knock if we were open, right? It's like, hey,
Right.
you're open from the beginning, but sometimes we've closed off, with all of our busyness and all the things we have going on. I think and in writing in the midst of all of this, it took this to happen so that we could really hear him as audibly as we hear everything and everybody else, right?
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
So when you were writing this book and you came up with the chapter dealing with intellectual humility, talk about dealing with intellectual humility.
Wow. So intellectual humility is probably one of the biggest lessons I had to learn. And for those of you thinking, what on earth is this intellectual woo? Intellectual humility simply means that you recognize that the information that you hold is always subject to change. You are open to recognizing that there was always more information. So you're intellectually humble. You're at a place where you understand that what you know, your intelligence, your knowledge of who you are, your life and calling, and God, that there was always much more to be learned. It's the beauty of why God is the beginning and the end, because there's a reservoir of knowledge that we simply don't know. And every day that we live, we are learning more about ourselves, who God has always created us to be. And that's why the concept emerging links with intellectual humility, because it's this sense that I may just be working at a shop or a store, I may just be preaching in a church, I may just be doing missions work, or I may see myself as a good housewife and a good mother. And that's who you know about who you are now. At the moment you kind of drop the mic and say, this is who I am, then you are surrendering the right to discover new things about yourself. Because you're almost prematurely giving in to the fact that what I know about myself and my future is a done deal. And it never is, because God is always wanting to show us new things about who we are. He's not saying, I'm going to add it to you from beyond you. It's not coming from the world beyond you. It's God actually saying, I want what's in you, what I put in you from the beginning of time, or before time, I want that to be released through your life. And so the closer that we walk with God, we can learn those things. And in my journey, Rashad, which is where the chapter opens up, I was watching an interview with Oprah Winfrey and Daniel Day-Lewis on the film called Abraham Lincoln. She was asking him what made him go for the role. And he says to her, to be honest, when I first read the script, I said that this was not a role that I wanted to do. I read through it, I understood the demands and who I would have to become. It was a huge role. But he said, after reading the script, something in me felt compelled to go through transformation. And when I read that, I was like, let's tell you in the book, I was standing there clapping my hands, going, you're speaking my language, And that was part of my journey, was actually seeing that. And it really spoke to me. It spoke to me. Sometimes God actually calls us into roles and positions and places, sometimes very different from what we've experienced before. Our natural position is to say, no, not me. I'm not going to leave from here and go to China to work with foster kids. I'm not going to leave my church I spent years building and begin an outreach ministry. I'm not going to go from business into law, because we've already said this is who I am. So that tension arises between who we think we are and who we want to be versus the calling of God. But sometimes, as he said, you must stop and think, okay, do I desperately want change and transformation in God? And if I do, and am I willing to go with where he's calling me?
Yeah.
And sometimes I think in different seasons, we need to be more flexible. That's what intellectual humility invites us to do, to be more open, more flexible.
Yeah.
When God had his conversation, Rashad, with Job, it was a moment of intellectual humility. People call it many things, but for me, it was intellectual humility. It was God saying, look, Job, sorry, I know you're a righteous man. I know that you've built many successes for your life, and I know that you've prospered, and I'm not taking any of that away from you. There are many things that you do not understand about the nature of who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a humbling moment for Job, you know. And so in my own journey, there are many instances where God had to say, Shah, I know that's who you think you are, but there's so much more to who you are.
Right.
And I want you to always be open to that.
Yeah.
You know, and so I share a couple of my own personal examples in the book of when I had to learn intellectual humility again.
Yeah. How amazing it is that I think most times we get comfortable in what we do and how we do it to a point, to a fault. And I think the moment God tries to do something new in our life, initially we all kind of like, yeah, no, just
Right.
right, because that requires me to learn something else, or that requires me to, because once we get settled, we kind of like, okay, now, I know how to do this. So every job we apply for, it's because we are good at that part, right? But not often do we challenge ourselves to do something new, and
Absolutely.
that's a good segue, just to be open. How hard is it? The older we get, the harder it is to be open, right?
You know what, Richard, that is such a fact, because information becomes ingrained. When you
Mhm.
start doing the same activities, your body gets used to routine, your mind gets used to routine.
Mhm.
And God knows that it takes new information to begin to take you through a different level of renewal.
Yeah.
So if we're not open, if we start rejecting the new information, it becomes a challenge. And that's why the book talks through many of the tensions that are created. Where do those tensions come from that make it hard for us to receive the new, whatever it may be, whatever
Mhm.
shape or form? But I think we all have our own kind of self-ideal, and that's what the
Mhm.
book also in that same chapter talks about.
Mhm.
So we have an idea, if I said to you, Rashad, and I said, Rashad, who do you want to be? Or how do you see yourself? You're going to create a picture,
Mhm.
Some people on here might say, I see myself, I want to be sexy, I want to get attention, I want people to see me and be proud, I want to be wise, I want to be known as someone who's wise, I want to be beautiful. Everyone has their own self-ideal in life, and most of us are not conscious of it. We don't sit and think, oh, what do I actually want to be in my nature, my character?
Right.
What do I want to be known about? Most of us don't sit and think about what our self-ideal actually is,
Right.
you know? Um, and I had some of my own self-ideals,
Mhm.
things I'm like, this is what I want to do though.
Yeah.
This is how I want to be seen. This is when I want to be seen.
Right.
This is where I want to be seen. And
Mhm.
God's like, I know that's the role you have,
Right.
but my script reads differently.
Right.
And the role I have for you in my script means you're going to have to change, honey. It's
Yeah.
not going to match your self ideal sometimes. And
Mhm.
that's part of that inattention
Yeah.
that you're speaking of there,
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's important that we embrace the newness, even sometimes. And we talk about a lot with the pandemic. We were forced into newness, right? Whatever you were anti before, now we are forced or thrust into a situation where you have to make some life adjustments and you have to do things differently. Yeah. So that's good to know as well. Now, your chapter 9 is dealing with something that's interesting. You said, I want to deal with concept from extractions. let's deal with these extractions even now.
So chapter 9 opens by talking about extractions. Extractions was such a big thing in my life and in my change with God. Extraction just means, the word extraction means that at different phases of our lives, different things are pulled out of us. So even in this conversation we're having, you're pulling out information from me, I'm learning information from you, even through our dialogue, and some of the listeners will too, you know.
Right.
We're extracting things, we're always pulling things by force from people's lives and learning. The concept of extraction means that sometimes people are pulling things from our lives and we're not even aware of it. So for example, in one of the children that I teach in one of their homes, the parent interrupted me. This is also in the book, lots of examples in the book, but a parent interrupted me and she said, I just need to tell you this, just Eastern European. I just want to tell you this, Sharlette. I've been wanting to tell you this for a couple of weeks. I said, okay. She said, whenever you teach my daughter, I feel as though just hearing your voice in the house, the atmosphere changes. She's not deeply spiritual or anything that we would say, okay? And so I'm listening keenly, and she says, you know, the whole atmosphere changes, and I feel differently even within my home. So I'm thinking, I hope this is a good thing, you know. And she said, I find that you're very inspirational. And I turned around and I said to one of my daughters, she has 2 daughters actually, she said, I want you to know Miss Reid for the rest of your life, because I feel like she's someone that you need to know.
Right.
And she just said, thank you for inspiring my family. And then she kind of went about her business. And the reason why it hit me, Rashad, is because it was happening in a context that I'm not used to, people reporting that type of experience. I knew that the move that she was experiencing was beyond me. It was actually the presence of the Holy Spirit that she was feeling in her home. And she was doing her best to articulate it the best way she could. But she's one of many other some other parents who have also come back and said different things, not all the same. And God said to me, you know, Sharlette, don't take for granted, and this is what the extraction is about, don't take for granted that there are people pulling things from your life, and some of them will come back and tell you, some of them never will.
Right, absolutely.
Ever. You know, when the woman with the issue of the blood touched the hem of Jesus' garment, the Bible says she went and hid because she had no intention of telling him that the virtue she received completely transformed her life.
Right.
But she went and hid. You know, and so there are people who we engage with every day in life who are extracting things, hope, healing. Some of them will never come back and tell you, thank you. You can say that about the lepers. It's a classic example.
Yeah.
And so God was saying to me, Shah, as you move through life, I don't want you looking for people to come back and tell you, your prayer changed my life. You opened a door. This happened, that happened. No. So take all of that. I don't want you thinking like that anymore. You know, especially in this culture, Rashad, because we get people who are like keeping a tally, and we always got to post up when something happens.
Right.
You know, today I prayed for somebody, and this happened today. The Lord opened a door for this person after, and God's like, I don't want none of that. Some of that is not spirit; it's flesh. Some of that, some of that. I'm not saying all the time. Some of that, you know. And God is saying, don't live your life looking for accolades or response. You have to come to a place of knowing that wherever you are, change and transformation is taking place.
Yeah.
So that was quite different. That's where the extraction concept came from.
Yeah. I think the Bible deals with, if you are doing things for public, you know, congratulations and public appreciation, he said, then you get your reward. That's your reward. If that's all you're doing it for, is, you get somebody that paid attention to the fact you gave. But I think the more we do and the more we give of ourselves, I think we're not even cognizant of, and what we consider people pulling from us is sometimes tangible, right? But we don't factor in the intangible things, the words of encouragement, words of comfort, the smile, or
That's right.
the peace, that we carry as well, because sometimes we are peace agents, right? We're peacemakers just by coming into a situation. So I think it's important that you understand your role in the extractions. We do
That's
pull
right.
from people, but there's
Mm,
always somebody, yeah, that's pulling from you, somebody that needs you, right?
that's
How
right.
important is it now in this climate, and I believe it's worldwide, where we have a lot of things and hatred and anger and a lot of things are going on in this world? How important is it that we pull from each other in a positive way? You don't want to pull from the wrong energy, but how important is it that we extract from some positivity in such a time as this, where the world is in chaos and in a pandemic at the same time?
I think it's essential, is the short answer to that. I think throughout life, we have to understand that extractions happen positively and negatively. Um, Whenever I meet with someone, it's not always leaving me with a positive experience, but I've still taken from it. I had, let's say, you've gone in, you've had a bad marriage, you've come out divorced, you've taken the learning from it, but it still caused you pain. It's still something you took from, extracted from the relationship, but prayerfully, there's lessons that provide a rich source of education to inform your future decisions. Um, but I think in the context that we're living in at the moment, with so many rifts, shifts, and shakes, so many people are become greatly opinionated about life, about what's happening in life, what is going to happen in life. Um, and so it's really important that you understand the source of some of those intentional extractions. When you're sitting down, you're receiving information because you're spending time to watch it, spending time to read it, you're engaging with particular people. Those are intentional extractions. You're going there and you're seeking out information or knowledge. It's why we come to church. It's intentional. Come there to fellowship. There's intentional reasons why I'm turning up. But it's important that we are gaining real value from those places where we're being informed. And that, something I say to a lot of people nowadays is, make sure you check the source of the information that you're gathering, the source of what people are telling you. Everyone has an opinion about you, about your life. People have expectations about you and about your life. I think the highest expectation is always the expectation of God. But if you are gleaning from other people's lives, if you're taking things from mentors or people or information, make sure that you understand the source and where it's coming from. That's important now more than ever. you know so yeah, I definitely encourage people, especially people who are listening, to make sure that what you're gleaning is promoting good spiritual health, promoting positivity, positive mindsets, and you're not drowning in negative news or fear mongering or anything else like that, because that really is important.
Yeah. And in the midst of all this, how important is our eternal consciousness as well?
My favorite.
Mhm.
So the eternal consciousness was one of the most provoking changes in my life. And I want to just be really clear, it's not a new age fad. The eternal consciousness came with Christ. He came to give us life eternal. He came to give us life everlasting, to be in constant covenant relationship. For those of you wondering what that means, relationship with God forever,
Mhm.
and the eternal consciousness means that you're eternally aware. That's all it means. You're eternally aware. You're living every day, but I'm recognizing that this three-dimensional world in which I live is not the only world. It's a passage, and
Mhm.
I'm going to end up somewhere else, somewhere that's better. God has a heavenly destiny for me, and that's actually his desire for all of humanity.
Mhm.
And so when God really started to speak to me about being eternally conscious, he just shook me up. Like, he was like, S, you are not concerned about other people's souls the way that you ought to be.
Mm.
You are taking for granted that the people you see today will be the same people you see tomorrow. And it wasn't that I didn't care about people's souls and lives, because I did, and I was doing work there, but God was telling me it's not at the top of your priorities anymore. It's like
Right.
third or fourth. It's like after
Right.
you've hit your goals, done what you need to do for the day, once you've
Yeah.
achieved what you need for 2020, then on the side, like your coleslaw and chips, that's
Yeah.
when you're thinking about the value of souls.
Hmm.
And it was because God said, you've lost your eternal consciousness. You're no longer aware of the value of a human soul,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
And God had to say to me, let me tell you, the value of the human soul is worth more to me than any riches, any goals, any breakthroughs you could ever have in your life.
Hmm.
Never forget and live with an eternal consciousness. And he really had to shake me up in many respects. The book details many different things that God had to do to really kind of awaken me back up to every day, you know, waking with that sense of adventure again, with the relationship with God. Like,
Right.
you know, who am I going to meet today? Simple, small things, you know,
Right.
simple moments of exchange and opportunities to bless somebody. And that's why the book has a chapter called Strangers, and the value of strangers, and strangers is mentioned over 70 plus times in the book of the
Hmm.
Bible,
Hmm.
because strangers mean something to God, and we've got to find ways of engaging with people who are different from ourselves, you
Yeah.
know. So so yeah, that eternal consciousness was definitely a major shift for me, Rashad.
Hmm.
Not that I didn't know, but it was coming back to being much more intentional, and like, this is ought to be number one in your chart every day,
Right.
honey.
Right.
You know,
And making the main thing again.
hello. This is
Yeah.
exactly it.
Yeah. And I
Yeah,
think if we look at it, that's all Jesus preached, right? Was kingdom and getting to the kingdom, right? And we, I
absolutely.
think, ultimately, as the church, uh, got more focused on the crowd than people getting their crowns, right? And so again,
Amen.
this book comes out at a time where we don't have the crowd anymore. So now you're forced to focus on, let's just make sure people have their relationship with God intact, right? So I think that's
Mm,
important. Now all of us get back to the place where, we focus on, yeah, there's more to life, and there's more
mm,
after the life that we live. So that's good. All right.
yeah,
So
yeah.
Emerge book, what do you want people to come away from when they read this book and you have written your last word for now? What did you what did you want people coming away from reading your book to be able to say?
I changed.
Nice.
I changed. Um, that would be those two are the most powerful words for me. The book is just pages and writing. It won't transcend to be more unless it does something to the minds of people and brings change. Um, I think people will read the book, and the book takes you on a journey. It asks you questions, personal questions, all the way through, and it provides practical solutions to help us to really live more sensitively, more flexibly, and to get what's in us out of us fully, you know. Um, but it's very real, you know. It's easier said than done, and the journey takes you um, through a very real journey, a very transparent journey. You know, I think you could read this with a group, and I think you could read this on your own and get just as much value from it.
Right.
But yeah, I've changed would probably be the two most powerful words after reading this book. Yeah.
Good. Now that you are an official author, there may be some aspiring authors, some authors that they're preparing to write now, or they're in the middle of writing. What words of wisdom, now that you've completed yours, now that you've given birth to your book, what words of wisdom would you give to those who are in the process of writing?
Wow, I'll probably use this analogy. I was sitting in my house one day looking outside, and it was really windy. I was glad I was inside.
Mhm.
And as I did, I watched this tree. It was just blowing relentlessly from side to side to side to side. And I was amazed the tree was still standing with a gust of wind and change happening.
Mhm.
But it moved, it swung and almost danced from side to side with the wind. And it demonstrated such a submission to the change that was going on. And I think as a writer, that level of flexibility to be grounded at some level in what your intentions are for the book, to remain open to the changes that come along the way, and to become flexible as a writer is probably the beauty of writing. That's what makes it the beautiful craft it is. And my encouragement to every writer on here would be, don't be inflexible to change. Some of the most beautiful things you'll write will come as new because you responded to the changes as they came to you.
Yeah.
And that's probably my little token for today.
Good. Well, we thank you for joining us. Now, for those who are watching, tell them how to keep up with all things Sharlette, and also how do they purchase the Emerge book?
Well, awesome people, you can keep up to date with everything that's Emerge related by following us on any of the social media platforms at the Emerge book. You can also go to the website, which is www.theemergebook.com. There's some classes that are starting online in the end of January, so that's where you can learn a little bit more as we go through the teachings from the book. And you can purchase the book from amazon.co.uk. We're hoping to get it out onto Kindle. I was boasting to Rashad, we're trying to do this. And we have an Audible recording in January. So there are different ways in which, if you're not a reader, not everyone reads, not everyone can read either. So we want to make sure that you can get this in your hands, in your ears, the best way that we can. So at the moment, the book is available on Amazon for $12.99. Amazon.co.uk, amazon.com. People in Germany, Korea have bought it, so you can get it online.
All right. Well, great. Thank you again for joining us all the way from London, a totally different time zone. But we thank you for joining us tonight. Remember, for those who are watching, remember to share this again if you've been blessed by the Emerge book and by what Sharlette Reid has given us. Make sure you share, start a watch party even now. And remember, every Tuesday at 6 o'clock, we are here for the virtual book club, where we interview authors from all over the world, as you can see, and we look forward to it. If you're an author and you have a book that you have released or is on its way, make sure you send us a message. Let us know that you too want to be a part of the virtual book club. Remember, I love you, and there's nothing you can do about it. See you next week.